The thought leadership process seems so simple. A ghostwriter works with a client to think through the client's ideas about a particular topic and helps frame the issue while pulling out valuable knowledge, wisdom, and insights about the topic from the client. The ghostwriter then gets to work assembling those ideas and creating a well-written piece of content that conveys those ideas persuasively and coherently. But sometimes a client asks the ghostwriter to do the heavy lifting with the substance of the thought leadership content instead of the client doing it. When that happens, the first draft is inevitably going to be not what the client is looking for. It's going to lack their knowledge, their wisdom, their insights, their perspective, their views of the world. Because obviously the ghostwriter isn't standing in the client's shoes. The draft becomes the ghostwriter's views of the topic in the world instead of the client's. Here's why that breaks the ghostwriting process and should be avoided at all costs. First, it slows down the process. The ghostwriter is going to have to conduct independent research. They're going to have to get comfortable and wrestle with topics they're not familiar with that might be new to them. And then they're going to have to produce a draft where they connect dots that they're not quite sure which should be connected or whether those dots are being connected to the right dots. They're going to provide a draft to a client who's almost certainly not going to be thrilled with it because it doesn't reflect the client's views of the topic. Then the client is going to want to get involved and tinker with the draft, probably heavily, to bring it in line with what their views are of the world regarding a particular topic. They're going to get involved in the writing process, which of course is going to take more time for the draft to be finished because now the client is involved. Second, it puts more work on the client's plate. The whole point of ghostwriting is for the client to convey their thoughts and ideas to the ghostwriter, who then takes those ideas and concepts and assembles them into content that is, again, persuasive and coherent. If the ghostwriter did their job well, the article is going to reflect the client's thoughts because the ghostwriter heard those client's thoughts. They extracted those thoughts from the client while they were talking. And then it'll be written in the client's writing style, and the writing will be clear and persuasive. The whole point of ghostwriting thought leadership is to help clients become more efficient and more prolific by producing more thought leadership content in less time. But if clients have to roll up their sleeves and make changes, they're not going to be much further ahead than they would be if they simply wrote the first draft themselves. Third, when clients ask ghostwriters to do the heavy lifting with respect to the substance of a piece of thought leadership content, it's going to increase the client's dissatisfaction with the process. When a ghostwriting relationship is firing on all cylinders, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Clients can consistently produce thought leadership with the help of a ghostwriter that communicates exactly what the client wants to put out there. It conveys the knowledge, wisdom, and insights they have in their own words and in their own style. But when they put the burden of coming up with the substance on a ghostwriter, and they have to spend time making changes to the drafts, they're going to be inevitably frustrated by the process, which means they're likely to not use a ghostwriter in the process. Fourth, breaking the process will then negatively impact the client's ability to market themselves, to build their authority, and to develop business. The truth is, few people, including professional services providers like attorneys, can become prolific thought leadership creators on their own. It's very tough to do. The most prolific ones often rely on their colleagues to assist them. That's why you see so many pieces of content co-authored by colleagues at a professional services firm, or they rely on ghostwriters and keep the byline for themselves. But if a client gets frustrated with the ghostwriting process because they're wanting the ghostwriter to handle the substance of the content, they're wanting the ghostwriter to do the heavy lifting in terms of creating the substance of the thought leadership content, the client isn't going to want to produce more content. The reason why they got a thought leadership ghostwriter in the first place was because they most likely didn't have time to produce this content on their own. So when they abandon the thought leadership program because they aren't thrilled with using a ghostwriter, they are going to be negatively impacting their ability to market themselves, to build authority, and to eventually develop business. Now, I'm saying all this. There will be times where clients ask ghostwriters to fill in some substantive information on top of the thoughts a client is providing. For example, a client might ask a ghostwriter to find some research or some survey results that support the overall point the client is trying to make. Or the client might ask a ghostwriter to walk through a subjective piece of information, such as what news reports said happened, or what is the substance or language of a piece of legislation. But when clients rely on ghostwriters to provide the substance of what will become a piece of thought leadership content that's really focused on the subjective views of the client and that relies on the subjective knowledge, insight, and wisdom that a client has, they break this ghost writing process, which causes short-term issues such as delays and frustration, but it also could lead to long-term issues such as a client not pursuing a thought leadership strategy, which will come back to haunt them down the road when they have trouble building their authority and they can't develop business through other means. If you're looking for more hot takes about thought leadership within the professional services world, or you're looking for best practices with respect to that kind of thought leadership, check out lawfirmeditorialservice.com. We have more than 400 videos, blog posts, and podcast episodes with hot takes, guidance, or both.